You just uttered one of those 4 phrases, and you have no idea what you've just unlocked. August 14th, 1941. Maximilian Kolbe is in an underground cell in Auschwitz, condemned to death by starvation, but instead of despair, he makes a discovery that would forever change how we understand spiritual protection. He notices something unsettling. Over the past few days, observing the prisoners around him, he identifies a pattern. Those who die first aren't necessarily the weakest physically. They are those who use certain words, specific words that seem to drain their life force. And then Kolbe understands, these words aren't just expressions. They are commands. Commands that our souls blindly obey. He jots this down on scraps of paper he manages to find, writings that would only be discovered decades later, hidden in a crack in the cell wall, words that seem harmless, but act as keys. Keys that unlock gates that should remain shut. And you've probably said at least one of them today, perhaps in the last few hours, maybe in the last few minutes. Pause for a second. Feel the weight of this. Feel how something within you already recognizes this truth, even before I fully explain it. Because what I'm about to reveal will completely change how you understand not only spiritual protection, but the very nature of the reality you inhabit. Kolbe discovered something that ancient mystics knew, but that modernity has made us forget. He realized that there are spiritual laws as precise as the laws of physics. And one of these laws is this: every word you utter is a declaration of power that shapes your energetic reality. He called it the unconscious dissolution of the barrier. But what he was describing was far deeper than we imagine. See, your spiritual protection isn't something abstract. It's a real energetic field that exists around you, like an invisible shield that filters which energies can or cannot access your life. And certain phrases act as access codes, passwords you type without realizing, into systems you definitely don't want to access. Kolbe discovered this by observing something disturbing. In the camp, there were prisoners who maintained a strange serenity, even under the worst conditions, and there were others who crumbled quickly, even if they were physically stronger. The difference wasn't in the strength of the body, it was in the strength of the words each one used. The first phrase that weakens your protection is this, and you've said it hundreds of times, maybe thousands. It's not possible. Seems harmless, doesn't it? 3 simple little words. But listen carefully to what really happens when you utter them. Let me tell you a story that will perfectly illustrate this. It was October 1941. Kolbe was observing a prisoner named Jan, a strong man, a carpenter, a father of 3. Jan had everything to survive: muscles, experience in hard labor, a will to live. But every time someone mentioned the possibility of escape, Jan repeated like a mantra, "It's not possible, it's not possible to escape from here." Every time they talked about spiritual resistance, Jan shook his head. "It's not possible to maintain faith in this place." Every time someone shared a little hope, Jan cut them off. "It's not possible for this to work out." In 6 weeks, Jan was dead. Not from starvation, not from illness. He simply faded away, as if he had switched off from the inside. Kolbe realized that Jan had created a reality where nothing good was possible, and the universe had exactly met that expectation. Because here's what you need to understand about the phrase, "it's not possible." Every time you utter it, you're doing something very specific. You are denying the reality of forces that exist beyond what your eyes can see, and when you deny something that exists, you become vulnerable to it. Think of it this way. Imagine you're in a dangerous city at night. You can choose to deny that there are dangers. "It's not possible that something bad will happen to me," and walk carelessly. Or you can acknowledge that there are both dangers and invisible protections, and consciously align yourself with the protections. The first option leaves you vulnerable. The second strengthens you. That's exactly what happens on the spiritual plane. When you say it's not possible, you're closing your mind to spiritual realities that could protect and guide you. You're creating an inverted shielding, a shield that prevents good from entering, but leaves gaps for everything else. And there's something even deeper happening here, something that took Kolbe weeks to fully understand. Every time you deny a positive possibility, you weaken your ability to recognize opportunities when they arise. It's as if you're training your brain to be blind to synchronicities, to divine assistance, to the small miracles that happen every day around you. Kolbe tested this. He began to observe prisoners who constantly said, "It's not possible." And he discovered something terrifying. These prisoners literally couldn't see the small opportunities for improvement that arose. An extra food distribution went unnoticed. A chance for lighter work was ignored. A moment of human connection that could bring spiritual comfort simply wasn't recognized. Not because these opportunities didn't exist, but because their minds had been programmed not to see them. It's like wearing glasses that filter certain colors. The colors still exist, but you can no longer see them. And here's the most disturbing part. Kolbe realized that this spiritual blindness was contagious. Prisoners who spent a lot of time with people who constantly said, "It's not possible," began to develop the same blindness, as if it were a mental virus spreading through repetition. But Kolbe also discovered the antidote. He began to consciously replace that phrase. Every time his mind wanted to say, "It's not possible," he forced a pause. And then he said internally, "All things are possible through the divine within me." It wasn't just positive thinking. It was the recognition of a spiritual reality. And do you know what happened? In 2 weeks, Kolbe began to notice things that other prisoners didn't see. Small opportunities, moments of grace, synchronicities that protected him from danger. Once he intuitively realized that he should switch places in the work line. Minutes later, an especially cruel guard appeared and brutalized exactly the prisoners who were in the position where he had been before. Coincidence? Kolbe didn't believe in coincidences. He believed that when you acknowledge that all things are possible through the divine, you become receptive to guidance that's always available, but that most people fail to perceive. That was just the first of Kolbe's 4 discoveries. But wait until you hear the second phrase. The second phrase is even more subtle and even more dangerous. But wait, because the second phrase is even more subtle and even more dangerous. This phrase worries me the most, because it's the one most people use without realizing the damage they're doing. I don't deserve it. Take a deep breath. Because now I'm going to tell you something that will completely change how you see yourself in the universe. Have you said that? Of course you have. We all have. I don't deserve this promotion. I don't deserve to be loved like this. I don't deserve things to work out for me. But have you ever stopped to think about what those words really do? What they create in your energetic reality? Let me tell you a story that Kolbe witnessed that will illustrate exactly that. There was a prisoner in the women's camp, adjacent to Kolbe's. Her name was Helena, a teacher, mother of 2, a woman who, before the war, was known for her kindness and generosity. Helena had arrived at the camp with a small piece of bread hidden in her clothes, enough food to survive a few more days. But when the other prisoners discovered it, instead of keeping it for herself, Helena started distributing small pieces, and every time someone thanked her, Helena said the same thing. "I don't deserve to have food when you don't." Every time someone offered to help her, Helena refused. "I don't deserve help. You need it more than I do." When some relief came, some small improvement in conditions, Helena always put herself last. "I don't deserve this." In 3 weeks, Helena had created a reality where literally nothing good came to her. Not by chance, not by bad luck, but because she had programmed her subconscious mind to reject anything good. And you know what impressed Kolbe the most? Helena died surrounded by people who loved her and wanted to help her, but she had become incapable of receiving that help. Because when you say, "I don't deserve it," you're not being humble. You're programming your subconscious mind to reject divine protection. It's as if you're telling the universe, "I'm not worthy of your help. Don't send blessings to me." And the universe actually listens. The universe always listens. But here's what really impressed me about this discovery by Kolbe. He realized that the phrase, "I don't deserve it," doesn't just block good things from coming to you. It actively attracts situations that confirm your low spiritual self-esteem. It's as if the universe says, "Are you sure you don't deserve it? Then I'll send you experiences that will confirm that." And you enter a vicious cycle. The more you say, "I don't deserve it," the more negative experiences you attract. And the more negative experiences you have, the more you believe you really don't deserve good things. Kolbe observed this repeatedly. People who constantly belittled themselves were more susceptible not only to physical suffering, but to spiritual attacks, to despair, to the feeling of divine abandonment, not because God loved them less, but because they themselves had created blockages to divine protection. It's like building a wall around your house to protect yourself, but building that wall on the outside, leaving you trapped inside without access to the resources you need. But there's something even deeper that Kolbe discovered about this phrase, something that will make you completely rethink your relationship with humility. He realized that there's a huge difference between true humility and spiritual self-deprecation. True humility is recognizing that you are a channel for the divine, that your qualities and abilities come from a source greater than yourself, but that as a channel you are valuable and worthy of being used for higher purposes. Spiritual self-deprecation is denying that you can be a divine channel. It's rejecting the possibility that the sacred wants to work through you. And when you say, "I don't deserve it," you are practicing spiritual self-deprecation disguised as humility. Kolbe tested this on himself. He began to consciously replace this phrase. Every time his mind wanted to say, "I don't deserve it," he paused and said internally, "I am worthy of all divine protection and blessing, because I am an expression of the divine." This wasn't arrogance. It was the recognition of a fundamental spiritual truth. And do you know what happened? Kolbe began to realize that opportunities to serve other prisoners appeared more frequently, as if the universe was testing his new capacity to receive in order to give more effectively. Once, a guard dropped a piece of bread near Kolbe's cell. Instead of thinking, "I don't deserve this food," Kolbe thought, "I accept this blessing so that I may have strength to help others." And that's exactly what happened. The extra energy from that food allowed him to spiritually comfort a dozen prisoners that night. Kolbe realized that when you become receptive to divine blessings, you automatically become a more effective channel for blessing others. But when you block yourself through self-deprecation, you not only harm yourself, you deprive the world of the gifts you could offer through you. And here's the part that impacts me the most. Kolbe discovered that the phrase, "I don't deserve it," is often passed down from generation to generation. Parents who feel unworthy create children who feel unworthy, and so the pattern perpetuates. But he also discovered that when you break this pattern in yourself, you automatically break it for future generations. It's as if you're healing not only your own spiritual lineage, but paving the way for your descendants to have easier access to divine protection and guidance. This brings us to the third phrase, and the third phrase is the one that scares me the most, because it's the most common of all, the one we use almost automatically when things get tough. Are you starting to understand the pattern? These phrases are not just words, they are statements of spiritual state. They are commands that you give to your subconscious about how to relate to the sacred. And there's more. Because these first two phrases create the perfect ground for the other two, the most dangerous. But before I continue, I need you to understand something fundamental. Kolbe didn't discover this by studying esoteric books. He discovered it by observing how faith works in practice, how spiritual protection manifests in the real world, in the concentration camps, where spiritual protection was literally a matter of life or death. Maximilian Kolbe identified patterns. Patterns that separated those who maintained their inner strength from those who fell apart. And one of the clearest patterns was this: the language we use shapes our spiritual reality. Think about your own life. How many times have you said, "It's impossible," when faced with something you didn't understand? How many times have you said, "I don't deserve it," when something good was happening? Every time you did that, you created resistance to the very protection you sought. But here's what strikes me most about Kolbe's discovery. He realized that these phrases act like a kind of reverse programming. Instead of strengthening our spiritual connection, they weaken it. It's as if you had protective software on your computer, but kept typing commands that disable it. And the third phrase? The third phrase is the one that scares me the most, because it's the most common of all, the one we use almost automatically when things get tough. It's not going to work. Pause for a moment. How many times this week alone have you said or thought that? This project isn't going to work. This relationship isn't going to work. This attempt at change isn't going to work. You might be thinking, but that's just realism. It's not unnecessary negativity. It's just being prepared for disappointment. But wait, let me explain what really happens when you utter those words, and why Kolbe considered this phrase one of the most dangerous to your spiritual protection. I'll tell you a story that Kolbe witnessed that will completely change how you understand the power of expectations. There were two prisoners who arrived at the camp on the same day. Both were engineers. Both were the same age, had the same physical condition, the same skills. Their names were Stefan and Pavel. The difference between them lay in how they approached each situation. When they were assigned a difficult task, Stefan would whisper to himself, "It's not going to work, I'm not going to succeed, it's going to be a disaster." Pavel, on the other hand, would take a deep breath and think, "I'll do the best I can. Something good might come of this." In the first few days, it seemed like Stefan was right. The work was brutal, the conditions impossible. But then Kolbe started noticing something strange. Stefan began making small mistakes. Nothing gigantic, but mistakes that made his work harder, as if his mind was subconsciously sabotaging his efforts to confirm his expectation of failure. Pavel, even facing the same difficulties, began to find small creative solutions, ways to make the work more efficient, ways to help other prisoners without attracting the attention of the guards. In 6 weeks, Stefan was in the infirmary, completely exhausted. Pavel was taking on small, informal leadership roles, helping groups of prisoners to survive better. Same conditions, same initial capabilities, completely different results. And Kolbe realized that the difference wasn't in willpower or luck. It was in the mental programming that each had created through their expectations. Because every time you declare it's not going to work, you're not just expressing an opinion. You are creating a spiritual expectation. You are aligning your energy with failure. And here's what amazes me most about this discovery. The universe doesn't distinguish between what you want and what you expect. It simply responds to the dominant frequency of your mind. It's like you're a radio station. You might want to broadcast classical music, but if your frequency is tuned to heavy metal, it's heavy metal that will come out. When you constantly expect things not to work out, you're tuning your mental frequency to the station of failure. And the universe picks up that frequency and delivers exactly that. But there's something even deeper happening here. Something that took Kolbe months to fully understand. He realized that the phrase, "it's not going to work," not only attracts failure, it also blinds you to the opportunities for success that appear. Remember Stefan? Kolbe observed that several times opportunities appeared for Stefan to improve his situation. A more favorable job change, a chance to connect with prisoners who could help him, moments where he could have demonstrated value to the guards in order to be treated better. But Stefan couldn't see these opportunities. His mind was so focused on anticipating problems that he had become blind to the possibilities. It's like driving looking only in the rearview mirror. You're so focused on the problems that have already passed that you can't see the opportunities that are ahead. And there's more. Kolbe discovered that people who constantly say it's not going to work develop a specific form of intelligence that I call failure intelligence. They become extremely skilled at identifying everything that could go wrong. They can anticipate problems with impressive accuracy, but they completely lose the ability to identify what could go right. It's like having a magnifying glass that only focuses on defects. You develop microscopic vision for problems, but you become blind to solutions. Kolbe tested this on himself during a particularly difficult week. He consciously decided to anticipate failure in everything. "It's not going to work," became his internal mantra. And do you know what happened? In 3 days, he had identified 17 things that could go wrong, and all of them happened. But he also realized that he had completely missed at least 5 opportunities for improvement that had appeared. Opportunities that other prisoners with more positive expectations had been able to take advantage of. That's when he understood that the phrase, "it's not going to work," is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Not because it magically causes problems, but because it programs your mind to create and attract exactly the conditions you are anticipating. Kolbe observed this repeatedly. Prisoners who constantly anticipated the worst were the ones who suffered the most. Not because they were less blessed or less protected, but because they had programmed their minds to receive exactly what they feared. It's like planting seeds of failure in the garden of your mind, and then wondering why your life doesn't flourish. But Kolbe also discovered the antidote, and the antidote is more powerful than you imagine. He began to consciously replace "it's not going to work" with "everything conspires in my favor." It wasn't a denial of reality. It was a conscious choice to align himself with the forces of the universe that work for your good. And in 2 weeks, Kolbe began to notice tangible changes. Small coincidences seemed to favor him. Opportunities appeared at just the right moment. Protections manifested in ways he hadn't even anticipated. Once he was being transferred to a particularly dangerous job. Instead of thinking, "This won't work," he took a deep breath and thought, "Everything is working in my favor." On the way to the work detail, one of the guards recognized that Kolbe had been a teacher before the war and assigned him to an administrative task, a task that was not only safer but allowed him to secretly help other prisoners with bureaucratic issues. Coincidence? Maximilian Kolbe had stopped believing in coincidences. He had begun to understand that when you align your expectations with the universe's positive forces, you become a magnet for protective synchronicities. And this brings us to the fourth phrase, the fourth and most dangerous of all, the phrase that not only weakens your protection, but actively invites energies you definitely don't want in your life. But there's something even deeper happening here, something that took Kolbe years to fully comprehend. When you use these three phrases, "It's impossible," "I don't deserve it," "It won't work," you're doing more than creating negative thoughts. You are altering your spiritual frequency. Imagine your soul vibrates at a certain frequency, a frequency that attracts protection, guidance, positive synchronicities. Now imagine that certain words act as interference with that frequency. That's exactly what happens. Every time you use one of these phrases, you add noise to your spiritual frequency, and the more noise there is, the less clear your connection becomes with divine protection. It's like trying to tune into a radio station with a lot of interference. The music is there, but you can't hear it clearly. And here's what impacts me most about all this. Kolbe realized that most people do this without realizing it. We spend years sabotaging our own spiritual protection through the language we use automatically. So far, I've talked about three phrases, three keys that open doors that should remain closed. But the fourth is different. The fourth phrase doesn't just weaken your protection, it actively invites energies you don't want in your life. But there's something even deeper happening here, something that took Kolbe years to fully comprehend. When you use these three phrases, "It's impossible," "I don't deserve it," "It won't work," you're doing more than creating negative thoughts. You are fundamentally altering your spiritual frequency. Imagine for a moment that your soul vibrates at a certain frequency, a frequency that naturally attracts protection, guidance, positive synchronicities, people who can help you, opportunities aligned with your higher purpose. Now imagine that certain words act like interference on that frequency, like noise that distorts the signal of your soul. That's exactly what happens. Every time you use one of these phrases, you add noise to your spiritual frequency. And the more noise there is, the less clear your connection becomes with the divine protection that is always available. It's like trying to tune into a radio station with a lot of static interference. The music is there, being broadcast, but you can't hear it clearly through all the noise. And here's what strikes me most about Kolbe's discovery. He realized that most people do this without realizing it. We spend years, sometimes decades, sabotaging our own spiritual protection through the language we use automatically. We're like radio technicians who spend all day adding interference to their own equipment and then wonder why the reception is so bad. But now we come to the most crucial point of all this. So far I've talked about three phrases, three keys that open doors that should remain closed. But the fourth phrase, the fourth is different. The fourth phrase doesn't just weaken your protection. It actively invites energies you don't want in your life. Take a deep breath, because what I'm about to reveal will explain many mysteries of your spiritual journey. Patterns that seemed inexplicable will suddenly make sense. The fourth phrase is this: I always suffer. Stop. Let that echo in your mind for a moment. I always suffer. How many times have you said that? How many times have you thought it? How many variations of that phrase have you used? Why does this always happen to me? I'm just unlucky. My life is a string of problems. Nothing ever works out for me. You might think it's just a vent, a way to express frustration, a way to process real difficulties you're facing. But it's not. It's much more than that, and much more dangerous. When you say, I always suffer, you're making a statement of spiritual identity. You're telling the universe, my natural state is suffering. This is how I identify myself. This is who I am. And you know what happens? The universe delivers. The universe always delivers. Let me tell you the most impactful story Kolbe witnessed, a story that will forever change how you understand the relationship between identity and destiny. There were two prisoners Kolbe observed for months. Both had lost their families. Both faced the same brutal conditions. Both had equally valid reasons to consider themselves victims of suffering. The first was named Tomasz. Every morning, Tomasz would wake up and his first phrase was, "Another day of suffering." During work, he'd repeat to himself, "I always suffer." When talking to other prisoners, his narrative was always, "My life is just suffering." The second was named Andrzej. Andrzej also suffered. He also felt pain. He also faced despair. But when these feelings arose, he would take a deep breath and remember, "I am experiencing suffering, but suffering is not who I am. I am an eternal soul experiencing a temporary situation." The difference may seem subtle, but the result was dramatic. Tomasz, by identifying with suffering, began to attract more situations that confirmed that identity. He was always in the wrong place at the wrong time. He always received the worst tasks. He always encountered the cruelest guards. More importantly, Tomasz became incapable of recognizing any relief or beauty that appeared. Once, another prisoner secretly shared a piece of sugar with him. Instead of feeling gratitude or sweetness, Tomasz thought, "It'll probably make me sick. I always suffer anyway." Andrzej, on the other hand, kept his identity separate from his circumstances. And this created a space where small miracles could happen. Andrzej was always in the right place at the right time. He managed to get the less brutal jobs. He encountered guards who were relatively more humane. And, more importantly, he managed to extract meaning and even moments of beauty from objectively terrible situations. Kolbe realized that the difference wasn't in the external circumstances. It was in the internal identity that each person had chosen. And then he understood something. That completely changed his understanding of spiritual protection. When you identify with suffering, you create a magnetic attraction to it. It's as if your soul is a magnet that attracts exactly what you identify with most deeply. But there's something even more frightening. Once you identify with suffering, your subconscious mind begins to sabotage anything that might interrupt that pattern. Have you ever noticed this in your own life? How sometimes, just when things are getting better, something goes wrong? As if there's an invisible force sabotaging your happiness? Well, that force exists, but it's not external. It's your own subconscious programming ensuring you remain true to the identity you've created for yourself. If you see yourself as someone who always suffers, your subconscious mind will work 24/7 to keep that identity intact. It will ignore opportunities for improvement. It will make choices that perpetuate problems. It will even create problems where none existed before. Not out of malice, but because your subconscious believes it's protecting you. It's protecting you from the inconsistency of being happy when your identity is based on suffering. Kolbe observed this with horror in the final days in the camp. Prisoners who had deeply identified with suffering literally couldn't accept liberation when it appeared. Once, there was an opportunity for some prisoners to be transferred to a camp with better conditions. Tomasz was on the list, but at the last minute, he created a problem with a guard that resulted in his removal from the list. When Kolbe asked why he had done that, Tomasz replied, "I knew it was going to go wrong anyway. I always suffer. It was better to accept that right away." Tomasz had chosen the familiarity of suffering over the uncertainty of improvement, and Kolbe realized that this was the deepest trap of all. Because it's not just about negative thoughts or bad expectations. It's about who you believe you are at your deepest. But here's what Kolbe discovered that will change everything for you. That identity can be changed completely. And when it changes, your entire reality changes with it. Not through empty affirmations or forced positive thinking, but through a specific technique that Kolbe developed during his final days. A technique he called conscious re-identification of essence. And now I'm going to teach you exactly how to do it. These 4 phrases can be reversed and completely. And when you reverse them, you not only strengthen your spiritual protection, you transform your entire reality, not through empty affirmations or forced positive thinking, but through a specific technique that Kolbe developed during his final days, a technique that he called conscious frequency substitution. But before I teach you this technique, I need you to understand something fundamental about how it works. Kolbe discovered that it's not enough to simply replace negative words with positive words. That would be mere mental cosmetics. What you need to do is reprogram the energetic frequency behind the words. It works like this. Each of the 4 destructive phrases operates on a specific frequency, like different radio stations, and each attracts a specific type of experience to your life. It's not possible vibrates at the frequency of limitation. I don't deserve it vibrates at the frequency of unworthiness. It won't work out vibrates at the frequency of expectation of failure. I always suffer vibrates at the frequency of identification with pain. To completely reverse these patterns, you need to consciously tune in to opposite frequencies, frequencies that not only neutralize the damage, but that actively magnetize protection and blessings into your life. I'm going to teach you the 4 substitutions now, but pay attention. It's not enough to just memorize them. You need to feel them. You need to vibrate with them. You need to allow them to reprogram your energetic identity. The first substitution, instead of "it's not possible," you say "everything is possible through the divine within me." But don't stop there. When you say this phrase, I want you to do something specific. Visualize a golden light entering the top of your head. Feel this light descending through your body, illuminating every cell, and imagine this light creating an expansion in your energetic field. Why does this work? Because you're anchoring the new frequency not just mentally, but energetically. You're creating a sensory experience that your subconscious mind can recognize and reproduce. Kolbe tested this under extreme conditions. Even when everything around him said there were no possibilities, he consciously tuned into this frequency of infinite possibilities, and invariably, possibilities appeared. The second substitution. Instead of "I don't deserve it," you say, "I am worthy of all divine protection and blessings." This phrase is especially powerful because it rebuilds your fundamental spiritual identity. It reminds your soul of who you truly are. But here's the secret that Kolbe discovered about this substitution. When you say it, you need to feel its truth in your body. So when you say "I am worthy," place your hand on your heart and feel the expansion that happens in your chest. This is the physical acknowledgement of your spiritual worthiness. And when you say "of all protection," imagine a shield of light forming around you, not a rigid shield, but an energetic field that is permeable only to what is beneficial to you. The third substitution. Instead of "it won't work out," you say "everything conspires in my favor." This phrase is profoundly transformative because it completely changes your energetic expectation. Instead of expecting problems, you program your mind to recognize opportunities and synchronicities. But there's a specific technique that Kolbe used to amplify the power of this substitution. Every time you say "everything conspires in my favor," immediately look for 3 small pieces of evidence that this might be true. It could be something as simple as the traffic light turning green at the right moment, or someone smiling at you in the street, or finding a parking space easily. The goal is not to force evidence. It's about training your mind to notice the positive cosmic conspiracy already unfolding, but that you weren't recognizing before. And the fourth substitution, this is the most powerful of all. Instead of "I always suffer," you say, "My essence is divine and indestructible." This phrase completely breaks the identification with suffering. It reminds you that suffering is a temporary experience you're going through, not a permanent identity you carry. But here's the specific technique Maximilian Kolbe developed to anchor this new identity. When you say, "My essence is divine," imagine a brilliant light in the center of your chest expanding to fill your entire body. This is the visualization of your true spiritual nature. And when you say "an indestructible," imagine that this light becomes so intense that nothing can diminish it or extinguish it. Not difficult circumstances, not negative people, not painful memories. Nothing can touch this essence. Maximilian Kolbe discovered that when you anchor this identity regularly, something extraordinary happens. You stop attracting situations that confirm your victimhood and begin attracting situations that confirm your spiritual power. But there's a secret that Maximilian Kolbe discovered about these substitutions, a secret that exponentially multiplies their power. The most powerful time to use these phrases isn't when you're feeling good. It's precisely when you're tempted to use the destructive phrases. It's in these moments of emotional vulnerability that your mind is most receptive to deep reprogramming. Imagine this, you're going through a real difficulty. Your mind automatically wants to say it's not going to work out. But instead you consciously stop, take a deep breath, and choose to say, everything is working in my favor. In that moment, you're not just changing a thought. You're breaking a neural pattern that may be decades old. You're literally rewiring your brain to operate on a higher frequency. And the more you do this, the more automatic the elevated response becomes. Until one day you realize that your mind naturally goes to positive frequencies, even in difficult situations. Maximilian Kolbe tested this under conditions that few human beings have ever faced. And it worked. Even in Auschwitz, even surrounded by the purest manifestation of human evil, he managed to maintain his elevated spiritual frequency through this practice. But there's a discovery he made that goes beyond all of this. A discovery that can transform not only your spiritual protection, but your entire reality and the reality of everyone around you. He realized that when you use these 4 power phrases consistently for a period of time, something extraordinary happens. You don't just protect yourself from negative energies. You begin to radiate a frequency that positively influences everything around you. It's as if you become a spiritual beacon. People around you begin to feel calmer in your presence, more hopeful, more connected to their own possibilities. Maximilian Kolbe discovered this when other prisoners began seeking him out just to be near him, not because he did anything specific for them, but because there was something about his presence that radiated peace, even in hell. And you know what the most incredible part is? You can develop this same radiation. It all starts with awareness of the words you use, with the discipline of replacing destructive patterns with constructive ones, and with the practice of anchoring these new frequencies in your body and your energy field. But don't stop at the basic substitutions. Maximilian Kolbe discovered 5 additional practices that dramatically accelerate this process of spiritual strengthening and expansion of your protective radiation. The first practice he called nightly verbal scanning. Every night in the last 5 minutes before sleep, you mentally review the most significant words you use during the day. You identify moments when you use the destructive phrases, and you mentally replace them with the power phrases, feeling the energetic difference. This programs your subconscious during sleep to make these substitutions automatically in the following days. The second practice is conscious morning shielding. In the first 5 minutes after waking up, while your mind is still in the theta state between sleep and wakefulness, you repeat the 4 power phrases with full intention. This establishes your base spiritual frequency for the entire day. But there's an important detail. Maximilian Kolbe discovered that the effectiveness of this practice multiplies when you do it facing the rising sun. Something about the light of dawn amplifies the energetic programming. The third practice will surprise you. Maximilian Kolbe discovered that teaching these substitutions to other people exponentially multiplies your own spiritual power. It's as if each person you help break these patterns becomes an extension of your own spiritual protection, as if you were creating a collective protection network. Think about it. How many people in your life are unconsciously sabotaging their own spiritual protection through these 4 phrases? Your children, your parents, your friends, your colleagues, all of them may be creating vulnerabilities that affect not only them individually, but the collective energy field you are a part of. But when you share this knowledge, when you help others break these patterns, you are strengthening the spiritual protection of your entire network of relationships. This is what Maximilian Kolbe called community shielding. The fourth practice is what he called anchoring through conscious service. Every time you use one of the 4 power phrases, immediately look for a small way to serve someone. It could be something as simple as sending a message of support, offering a prayer for someone who is suffering, or performing an anonymous act of kindness. This anchors the new frequency through action, making it more stable and lasting. And the 5th practice, this is the most advanced of all. Maximilian Kolbe discovered that you can use the 4 power phrases to create what he called specific energy shields for different situations in your life. For example, before entering an important meeting, you can mentally say, "Everything is possible through the divine in me," and visualize golden light filling the environment, creating conditions for the best possible outcome. Before a difficult conversation, you can say, "I am worthy of all protection and blessing," and imagine a protective field around you that only allows constructive words to reach you. When facing a complex decision, you can say, "Everything is working in my favor," and feel how this opens your perception to see options you couldn't see before. And when you're going through any kind of difficulty, you can say, "My essence is divine and indestructible," and feel how this connects you to a source of strength that's beyond the circumstances. Maximilian Kolbe tested these specific applications in situations that changed minute by minute, and he discovered that the more specific the application, the more powerful the result. But there's something he considered essential for the success of all these practices, something that can make the difference between real transformation and just mental exercise. You need to understand that this change will likely meet resistance, not just from your own conditioned mind, but from external energies that benefited from your previous spiritual vulnerability. When you strengthen your spiritual protection this way, some situations and people in your life may react negatively. This is not a coincidence. It's revelation. You're becoming energetically incompatible with frequencies that previously had easy access to you. And that's exactly what you want to happen. Kolbe taught that this resistance is a sign that you're on the right path. It's proof that your spiritual protection is strengthening and your frequency is really changing. But he also developed a specific technique to deal with this resistance, a technique he called compassionate neutralization through conscious irradiation. When you encounter external resistance to your changes, instead of getting into conflict or trying to convince someone, you simply maintain your new frequency and consciously radiate energy of love to the situation. Not emotional or personal love, but spiritual love. The divine energy that wishes the highest good for everyone involved, even if that highest good isn't what people want at the moment. This neutralizes the resistance without creating more conflict. And gradually, either people and situations align with your new frequency, or they naturally move away from your life. Either way, you win. Kolbe observed this repeatedly. Prisoners who applied these practices began to attract more positive companions, less aggressive guards, more favorable opportunities, not through manipulation, but through the natural alignment of frequencies. And here's something that will make you want to start these practices today. Kolbe realized that people who consistently apply these techniques for just 21 days begin to experience tangible changes in their lives. In the first 7 days, you'll notice changes in your inner energy, more mental clarity, less anxiety, a subtle but real feeling of being more protected. Between days 8 and 14, you'll start noticing small positive synchronicities, favorable coincidences that begin to appear more frequently. And between days 15 and 21, more obvious external changes begin to manifest. Relationships improve, opportunities appear, problems resolve more easily, situations that seemed stuck begin to flow. It's not magic in the superficial sense. It's deep spiritual alignment. When you stop sabotaging your own spiritual protection, when you stop interfering with your own divine frequency through self-destructive language, your life naturally flows towards what is best for you. It's like removing obstacles from a river. The water always knew where it wanted to go, it just needed an unobstructed path. But there's one last discovery of Kolbe's that I need to share with you. Something he considered the final secret of this whole transformation. He realized that practicing these techniques doesn't just change your personal reality, they connect you to an invisible network of spiritual protection that exists around the planet. Kolbe believed that there are human beings scattered around the world who consciously or unconsciously maintain a high frequency that serves as protection for all of humanity, like spiritual lighthouses that help maintain the planet's energetic balance. And when you consistently raise your own frequency, you become part of this network. You become a point of light that not only protects you, but contributes to the protection of other human beings you don't even know. It's what he called serving through being. In his last writings it found decades later, Kolbe wrote, "I discovered that the most powerful spiritual protection comes when you stop asking for protection only for yourself and begin to radiate protection to all beings. Paradoxically, when you become a spiritual protector, you become perfectly protected. And this is perhaps the deepest discovery of all. That maximum spiritual protection doesn't come from building walls around yourself, but from becoming a source of light so intense that nothing negative can approach. Now you have everything you need. The 4 phrases that weaken your spiritual protection, the 4 substitutions that strengthen it, the 5 practices that accelerate your transformation, and the understanding of how all this connects you to a larger network of spiritual protection. But remember what Kolbe always emphasized: knowledge without application is just intellectual entertainment. The spiritual protection you seek, the transformation you desire, the aligned life you know is possible. All this only manifests through the consistent practice of these principles. Don't wait until Monday. Don't wait until things get better. Don't wait until you feel motivated. Start now. Start today, this moment. Observe your words in the next few hours. When you realize you're using one of the 4 destructive phrases, consciously stop and make the substitution. Feel the energetic difference this creates. Practice the morning shielding tomorrow. Dedicate 5 minutes to establishing your frequency with the 4 power phrases. Try the nightly verbal scan tonight. Review the day, and mentally reprogram the moments when you used self-destructive language. And in 21 days, you will viscerally understand what Kolbe meant when he wrote his last words before dying in Auschwitz. Divine protection is always available to those who know how to align themselves with it through the purity of language and the elevation of personal frequency. You now know how to align. You know the 4 keys that weaken your protection and how to transform them into 4 portals of power. You understand how your language shapes your energetic reality. You have the specific practices to accelerate your transformation, and you know this shift, this change. It doesn't just benefit you, it contributes to the spiritual upliftment of all humanity. The final question, the only question that truly matters now, is this: will you use this knowledge? Because Maximilian Kolbe discovered something more in his final days. He realized that spiritual knowledge left unapplied doesn't just remain useless. It becomes a weight, a burden, a responsibility that our soul carries, a heavy cloak. But spiritual knowledge applied with sincerity becomes a transformative force, an echoing power that resonates across dimensions we can barely imagine, a ripple effect of grace. The choice is yours, and the moment is now.